So if you're watching or listening, you identify with the travails of the working class, the hardships, stress, pressure of the hamster wheel, day in and day out. So let's change gears a little and try to see more of the bright side, if you will. I know I can do more of that myself. Think about the people in your life who seem almost magically upbeat. The glass half full types who take a hit, absorb it, and somehow keep moving. Meanwhile, plenty of us are over here replaying the worst case scenario on a loop. So here's the question. Are some people just born optimistic and the rest of us are out of luck? Or is optimism something you can learn the same way you learn any skill? Let's walk through an idea called practical optimism. It's a framework created by psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma. And the whole point is that optimism doesn't have to mean denial, cheerleading, or pretending things are fine. Practical optimism is realistic, actionable, and designed to help you function better in everyday stress and also in major adversity. One of the most encouraging parts of this approach is the claim that only a slice of optimism is purely genetic. The rest is shaped by what you practice, how you interpret setbacks, how you regulate emotions, and what you do next. In other words, you're not stuck with whatever outlook you came with. You can build a better one. Dr. Varma developed this over years of clinical work, including work that began in one of the most intense environments imaginable, supporting people affected by the aftermath of 9/11, from first responders to civilians. And while she treated very real PTSD, depression, and anxiety, she also noticed something that surprised her. There were some people who had every reason to fall apart, yet they didn't develop the same level of severe symptoms. They still struggled, but something seemed to protect them. When she asked one survivor what her secret was, the answer wasn't some vague positive thinking slogan. It was purpose. This woman kept showing up, volunteered, helped other people to get appointments, advocated for resources. She had a reason to get out of bed, and she acted on it. That idea became the foundation for what Varma later described as 8 pillars of practical optimism. You can think of them as a roadmap, not for pretending life is easy, but for handling life as it actually is. And importantly, this isn't only for the huge life-altering events. The same mindset that can help someone cope with a big T trauma can also help you deal with what she calls the little T traumas, the everyday blows, the hassles, the breakups, the job stress, the uncertainty that builds up over time. So before we get into the how, let's be really clear about what practical optimism is not. It's not toxic positivity. It's not telling yourself everything is going to be fine when clearly it's not. It's not skipping grief, skipping anger, skipping fear, and slapping a motivational quote over it. Toxic positivity tends to sound like, don't worry, it'll all work out, or just look on the bright side, especially when someone's in pain. And when you're the one hurting, that kind of response can feel dismissive, like your experience is being waved away. Sometimes you don't need a silver lining. Sometimes you need to vent. Sometimes you need to be heard. Sometimes you need someone to sit with you in it. Practical optimism also isn't exactly the same as resilience, even though they're related. Resilience is often described as bouncing back after something bad happens. Practical optimism goes a step further. It's about learning how to thrive even when life is hard. Because bouncing back suggests returning to baseline. And for a lot of people, the baseline wasn't stable or healthy to begin with. Practical optimism is about building a sturdier foundation, not just returning to whatever you had before. At its core, practical optimism is a balanced way of thinking that leads to action. It means you look at the situation honestly, you weigh the pros and cons, you get realistic about the risks, and then you do something useful with what you know. This is where it helps to imagine 2 extremes. On one side, you got the extreme optimist who moves too fast and minimizes the problem. On the other side, you've got the extreme pessimist who gets stuck in fear and overthinking. Both can lead to inaction just for different reasons. Here's a simple example. You get blood work back and it shows borderline high cholesterol. The extreme optimist might shrug it off and ignore it, assuming it'll resolve itself. The extreme pessimist might avoid follow-up entirely because they're terrified of what they'll find out. Either way, nothing improves. Practical optimism is the middle path. You take the information in, you accept that it matters, and then you take concrete steps to address it. Another useful point in this framework is how pessimism tends to distort reality in 2 directions at once. It can make you overestimate how likely bad outcomes are, and at the same time underestimate your ability to cope if they happen. Practical optimism aims to correct both. It pushes you toward a more accurate risk assessment, and it strengthens the coping skills that help you handle whatever comes next. And there's research that supports why this matters. Studies have linked optimism with better cardiovascular outcomes. Other research suggests that more optimistic people have a lower risk of dementia compared to more pessimistic people, even when you account for other factors like exercise habits, smoking, depression, and chronic illness. There are also findings suggesting optimistic people tend to live longer on average and have better health-related behaviors overall. Now, those studies don't mean optimism is some magical shield, but they do suggest that how you think and what you do because of how you think can shape your health and your life in measurable ways. So how do you actually practice practical optimism? Varma organizes it into 8 pillars. I'm going to walk through each one in a way that's easy to follow, like an action plan you can revisit. Pillar 1 is purpose. Purpose can be big, like your long-term direction in life, but can also be small and immediate. What's my intention for today, for this meeting, for this conversation? What am I trying to bring into the next hour of my life? The key is being specific rather than vague. And purpose doesn't have to mean grinding toward achievements. It also includes joy and pleasure. It includes doing things that feel meaningful and alive, even if they're small. One interesting detail from this framework is that even brief movement, like a brisk 10-minute walk, can boost a sense of purpose, not because it solves your whole life, but because it changes your state and reminds you you can act. Pillar 2 is processing emotions. This is where practical optimism gets very grounded. Instead of bypassing feelings, it gives you a structure for dealing with them. Varma describes this as a 4-step sequence. Name it, claim it, tame it, and reframe it. First, name it. What exactly is dragging you down? The more precise you can be, the better. Not just, I'm stressed, but I'm stressed because I'm afraid I won't meet the deadline, or I'm stressed because that conversation felt dismissive and I'm replaying it. Then claim it. Where does it show up in your body? Are your shoulders tight? Is your stomach in knots? Are you clenching your jaw? This step matters because emotions aren't only thoughts. They're physical experiences too, and noticing that helps you intervene sooner. Next, tame it. This is the regulation step. For one person, it's a 1-minute meditation. For someone else, it's journaling, deep breathing, or taking a short walk. The point is not to erase the emotion. The point is to bring it down to a level where you can think and choose your next move. And then reframe it if you can. Is there a perspective that's more helpful? Can you find a lesson, a next step, a partial upside? But here's an important nuance. Sometimes you can't. Not everything has a bright side, of course. When you can't find a positive spin, practical optimism offers a different question. Is this a problem to be solved or a truth to be accepted? That distinction can be incredibly freeing. Acceptance in this sense isn't surrender. It's acknowledging reality and recognizing the limits of what you can control in that moment. Pillar 3 is problem solving. This is where you blend intuition, logic, and emotional regulation, and then actually take action. It's the bridge between I understand what I feel, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Practical optimism keeps circling back to action, because action is what changes your life, not just insight. Pillar 4 is pride, and it's not about arrogance. It's about self-compassion and building steady self-worth. A lot of people feel unhappy not because they're doing nothing, but because they're constantly measuring themselves against impossible standards. Perfectionism and that running internal script of I should be farther along now can make life feel like a permanent failing grade. Self-compassion sounds soft, but is surprisingly practical. Research has shown that even brief self-compassion exercises can reduce shame and guilt enough to improve performance because you're less likely to freeze up. When you're not spending all your energy beating yourself up, you have more energy to focus and learn. Pillar 5 is proficiency. This pillar is about building confidence through skill and competence. Instead of waiting to feel confident and then trying, you try, build capability, and let real confidence grow from evidence. It's the difference between wishing you were good at something and putting in the reps that make you good at something. Pillar 6, presence. This is about clearing mental clutter and reclaiming attention. When your mind is constantly switching tabs, it's hard to feel optimistic because it's hard to feel anything fully except overwhelmed. Presence can look like mindfulness, single tasking, or simply creating boundaries around distractions so your brain can breathe again. Pillar 7 is people. Practical optimism is not a solo sport. It includes relationships, connection, and belonging. Not necessarily having a massive social circle, I certainly don't, but having real points of contact. people you can be honest with, people you can support, people who remind you you're not doing life alone. Pillar 8 is healthy habits, and Varma boils this down into the 4 M's of mental health: mindfulness, meaningful engagement, mastery, and movement. This is where the framework becomes very tangible. Mindfulness might be a short daily meditation, or a few minutes of quiet breathing, or simply paying attention to your senses while you eat lunch. Meaningful engagement could be as simple as sending a genuine message to a friend, not a surface-level check-in, but something real. Mastery means investing in a hobby or skill that gets you into a flow state, where you feel absorbed and capable. And movement is exactly what it sounds like: consistent physical activity that supports your brain and body. A key idea here is consistency over intensity. 10 minutes a day can be non-negotiable, not because 10 minutes fixes everything, but because it reinforces the identity of someone who shows up for their well-being even when the day is chaotic. Alongside these pillars, Varma also recommends exercises that strengthen practical optimism. One is the best possible scenario visualization. And no, this isn't daydreaming with no follow-through. It's more like mentally rehearsing success, so you can clarify what you're aiming at and what it would take to get there. You picture the problem, you map out the path, and you imagine arriving at a solution. You get specific. What does success actually look like, and how would it feel? A lot of people never let themselves define that clearly, which makes it harder to take purposeful steps. Another tool is what she calls borrowed mastery. This is for moments when you feel like you're failing across the board. Borrowed mastery means you identify an area where you're competent or strong, and you let that evidence carry over into an area where you feel shaky. For example, someone going through a divorce might say, "I'm not good at fucking anything." But maybe they're a loyal friend, the person who shows up, the person others can rely on. That counts. That reflects integrity and capability. And recognizing it isn't cheesy, it's data. When you stop minimizing your strengths, you have something solid to stand on while you rebuild other parts of your life. And one of the most relatable parts of this concept is that even the person who created it says she has to practice it. Her mind, like many minds, naturally jumps toward worst-case scenarios. So practical optimism isn't a personality trait you either have or don't. It's a practice, like yoga. Some days you do a little, some days maybe you do more. The point is you return to it. So if you're taking one thing away, let it be this: practical optimism isn't pretending everything is okay. It's facing what's real, regulating what you feel, and choosing the next action anyway. And if that sounds simple, it's because it is simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. It means you can actually do it again and again until it starts to change your default settings. Pick one pillar to start with this coming week: purpose, presence, people, movement. Any of them. Choose something small enough that you'll do it, and concrete enough that you know you did. That's how this mindset stops being an idea and starts becoming a skill.